today we have a really cool video. Today we're gonna go over lenses, the difference between wide and telephoto, what all the symbols mean, why they all vary in price so much, and finally, what lens you should buy. Now we have a lot of information to cover in this video. I'm gonna try and keep it pretty concise, so let's get right into it. Will Simpson here, and welcome to Exploring Photography. You already know what we're doing in this video, so let's just get started with the types of lenses. Now there are several types of lenses, so I'm gonna go over the standard basic ones, and I'm gonna use my notes because there's a ton of information here. So, got my notes here. The first lens is an ultra wide lens. We're gonna start with wide. Ultra wide is anything between like 10 and 15. Basically, you can get almost 180 degrees. That's kind of an ultra wide lens. A wide lens is anything from like 15 to 35, something like that. Now, it's not necessarily a set number, set millimeter here. This is all kind of about. So there are gray areas between, say, ultra wide and standard, and so on and so forth. The standard lens is anything that's similar to like the normal eye. It's what you would perceive. And this is around like 35 to 65, even 70, something like that. And then you have a telephoto, which is about 85 plus, which you can zoom in and pull things close to you. Then you have a super telephoto, which is like 400, anything over 200 in my opinion. It's like 400, 600, 800. Anything that you can really get far and pull it really close to you. Those are kind of the primary lenses that you'll see and the ones that you'll be using here and there. Now there are special lenses, like there's a macro lens, which allows you to get really fine detail. And we'll get into this a little bit more later, some examples and things like that. But a macro lens is gonna get really close in detail where another lens wouldn't be able to get, like bugs, leaves, drops of water. Also really good for like wedding photography, really getting detailed shots of the ring, things like that. Then there's also what's considered a kit lens. Now a kit lens is generally brands' way of creating a super cheap lens that is good, like it's good for casual photography, but it's not anything professional. You can get good photos, but it's for casual photography. And the purpose of it is to give you, the buyer, kind of incentive to buy your new camera body because it comes with a lens and so that you can go out and shoot. But quality-wise, they're probably the lowest quality lenses. That doesn't mean you can't get good photos. It's a great starter lens. It's just something that you'll upgrade eventually. Now, another two type of lenses are a prime and a zoom lens, and they're very simple. A zoom lens can adjust in and out, just like that. So you can go from a minimum millimeter to a maximum millimeter, where a prime lens is a fixed focal length. So this one here is a 7200, meaning it can go from 70 millimeters all the way to 200 millimeters. This is a 50 millimeter. It is set at a 50 millimeter. Benefits of a prime lens is generally they can have a lower f-stop. Like this is an f2.8 through and through. This is an f1.8. And I'll get into the differences a little bit later, but I just want to explain that there are a difference between prime and zoom lenses. Now the next thing is kind of the details of a lens. Now obviously without the lens you can't take photos because it allows the image in, the light in, but what are the specifications of a lens and what do they mean? Well, if you look on some of these lenses, you'll notice it has a lot of information around the size of the lens. It's got numbers on it. It's got information all over it. So what does all of that mean? Well, the first thing to know is that the f-stop, the aperture, is controlled by the camera body, but it is determined by your lens. So this is a common misconception. A lot of people think, well, I adjust the f-stop with the camera, so that must mean that the camera is the one that controls the f-stop. Well, yes, it does control, but it doesn't determine. This is why lenses generally range in price substantially, and again, we'll get to that part a little bit later as well. So let's break down what all of this means on the lens. Now, I'm using Canon camera lenses. It's just what I use, it's what I have. So if you use Sony, Nikon, Fuji, or something else, or even a different lens like a Sigma, or what is the other one? Tamron. Tamron. If you use a Tamron or something like that, they will have similar symbols, and I invite you just to Google them because it's really good to understand what all of this stuff means. So the first thing is on a Canon lens is obviously Canon. It says Canon. That is the brand. Now, the next thing in this case is macro. Okay, so on this one, like the 16 to 35, it says Canon zoom. So it's first is brand and then the type of lens. So macro, zoom, prime. Let's see if it actually says prime on. Here's a prime lens. It does not. It does not say prime on it, but that's okay. All right, so the next thing, and I'm gonna use the 16 to 35 as the example now. The next thing is the EF. Now, EF is the mount, how this mounts onto a camera body. For example, the R5 uses an RF mount. These use a EF mount, and then I think some Canon cameras use an EFM mount. So there's different mounts, and that helps you decide which lenses mount to your camera body. So if you're using like a Canon Rebel, it's an EF mount. But if you're using one of the R series cameras, the EOS R, the EOS RP, R6, R5, anything like that, those are RF mounts. Now you also can get an adapter. This is an EF lens on an RF mount. So this hooks to the EF mount here, and then this is transferred into an RF mount so it can mount onto my R5. Okay, moving on to the next. I know this is a lot of data, a lot of fast. I'm trying to keep the video short, so you can rewatch this video, pause it, digest, whatever you want to do. So the next thing on the lens is 16 to 35 millimeter. This is the minimum millimeter to the maximum millimeter. So obviously this is a zoom lens, so you can zoom in and out, kind of tells you what the lens you're working with is. A prime lens obviously will not be able to zoom. It is considered a fixed focal length, so it is 50 millimeters, it's 50 millimeters. All right, the next thing is 2.8. Now this is very important. Okay, so we have gone over a ton of information, and I know I've gone really fast. I apologize. I hope it's been somewhat understandable and you've been learning something. So if it's been helpful, I would really appreciate if you took a minute just to hit that like button. It takes 2 seconds and it really, really helps the video and helps me, and I really, really appreciate it, you guys. Thank you so much. Let's carry on. Now this is very important. This is very confusing to people sometimes. 2.8. What this means is the 2.8 is the lowest f-stop that the lens can go. Now you have seen lenses that are f3.5 to f5.6, where the lens says 3.5-5.6. What this means is at the lowest millimeter of that lens, it can be a 3.5. As you zoom in, the f-stop's minimum raises until finally it is maxed out at 5.6. That doesn't mean that you can't go higher. So let's say it's a minimum 3.5 to 5.6, but the maximum is 22. So if you're, usually this is on like kit lenses or less expensive, cheaper lenses. So if you have a, let's say a 55 to a 105, what is it? What is that lens considered? Gotta have notes everywhere. Here we go. Okay, let's say you have an 18 to 55, 3.5 to 5.6. What this means is at 18 millimeters, you can be a 3.5 f-stop, or up to the maximum. As you zoom in to 55, that minimum f-stop raises until 5.6. So at 55 millimeters, your minimum f-stop is 5.6 to whatever the maximum is of the lens. So you can adjust it, but you can't go to 3.5 at 55 millimeters. I hope that makes sense, but that is a super important thing to understand on your lenses. The next thing on the lenses is L. In this case, this is this red ring is Canon's marking for luxury lenses. It's their top of the line professional brand. You don't necessarily need these to take really good photos, but if you are going to be doing photography professionally, it is something to look into. They are way more expensive though. But if they are, they will have an L on them. If they are not the luxury ones, they will not have anything on them. Okay, the next thing, where is my 50? I think it's in the bag. Found it, okay. So let's look, this is my 50 millimeter. I love this thing, this is my baby. This is my baby. Okay, the next thing on the lens is 3. The next thing on the lens is 3. This just designates how many versions of this lens there are. So if it was the first version, it would say 1, second version 2, third version 3, so on and so forth. They continually update the lenses. It's the same lens, but it's the 3rd version of it. Just like a Canon 6D Mark II, Mark II, Mark III. Good. And the final thing is USM. But first, I want to give you 3 free presets for Lightroom that I absolutely love. One of these presets, the Apocalyptic preset that comes free with this pack, is a preset that I created when I did an edit on a photo that is one of my most popular prints, and I have sold thousands and thousands of dollars of this print, and I'm going to give you that preset, that edit, for free. All you have to do is click the link in the description and fill out the form, and they will be emailed directly to you. There's also a special treat for you, but click the link in the description, fill out the form, and they'll be emailed right to you. Make sure you check your spam, promotional, or social folders that Google has, and yeah, enjoy. And the final thing is USM. What this stands for is ultrasonic motor. This is simply the type of autofocusing motor that is in this lens. This is like the upgraded, generally quieter motor of Canon's. It's a little bit heavier, but it does keep it really quiet. There's another one called STM, which is stepper motor. It's another type of motor. And I'm sure your lens, if not Canon, have a similar designation that marks the type of motor in those. The next thing on the lens is a little circle with a line through it, and then something that says like 82 millimeters, 77 millimeters, 64, 55, and so on and so forth. This is the size of this opening and designates the size of ND filter to buy to fit on this opening. So ND filters come in a variety of sizes because your lens openings come in a variety of sizes. So let's take this and let me show you an example. So here is a 1635 wide and here is a 7200 telephoto. Their lenses openings are, that's a terrible example, relatively the same. Okay, let's do this differently. So here's a 16 to 35 opening, and here's a 50 millimeter prime opening. You can see that the actual sizes of the lens are substantially different, and an ND filter that fits this will not fit this, and vice versa. So if you look on your lens, you will see that little symbol. This is a 49 millimeter. That means that you need an ND filter that fits a 49 millimeter ring. So if you take your ND filters, right? This one fits an 82. I don't know if you can see that. Anyways, this one fits an 82 millimeter, whereas this one here also fits an 82 millimeter. Okay, I have all 82 millimeter ND filters. The ND filters will say what millimeters they are. This video is getting out of control. There's so much information that we need to cover. And that's how you figure out the ND filter that you need for your lens. Whew! The next thing is you have some switches and stuff usually on your lens, and that is this one, autofocus manual. This is switching your lens from autofocus to manual focus. Obviously, then you have to adjust the ring to focus, switch that back. Some lenses have one that says IS, which is image stabilization. I think this one has it. Or it just says stabilizer on or off, so this gives your image stabilization. There is a lock button right here on some lenses that will lock it so you cannot zoom in and out. So that controls that. Then sometimes there's some other switches, but you just kind of have to figure those out as you go. Just Google and be like, hey, what does this switch do? Figure it out, because I'm sure other lenses, other brands have different switches on them as well. Hey guys, so this video during editing became way too long. Again, there's so much information on lenses and I was trying to pack it in a lot of data, but without making the video too long. So I'm just gonna make it 2 parts and make it super easy. So part 2 will be on Thursday. So go ahead and like this video. If you haven't already, subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments, but I'll see you guys on Thursday.